Hi, welcome to B2B Marketing Talk. I'm Steve Farnsworth, and this is by Impress Labs, and I am with David Richardson, Managing Partner at Impress Labs. Welcome, Dave.
Thanks very much, Steve. How are you doing?
Doing real good. Today Dave and I are going to talk a little bit about there's been a real fundamental shift in marketing, and a lot of marketers still don't quite get it, and definitely management is still having a hard time grasping it. Traditionally, we have been really campaign based, and it's really great for executives because they can go to their quarterly meetings, their offsites, and go, look, we did all this great stuff in this quarter, these bullet marks. And there's been a fundamental shift. There's still be campaigns, but now as marketing goes into this place where we can track things and we build audiences, it's a much greater need to have kind of always marketing processes that we're reviewing and iterating on. And as opposed to like doing an email campaign that's got just 4 emails to it or something like that, we're now thinking about drip marketing and an established email list where we're trying to bring those people along and convert them. So, Dave, what do you think? I mean, why? You come across this. You guys are an agency, and a lot of people, you must see this a lot. What do you think the resistance is, or the mind block is for people like kind of getting their heads around the shift from all campaign-based to things that are always marketing?
Well, first and foremost, Steve, I think there's a case for both. I think you do always need to be marketing, but there are times when you've got specific goals you need to achieve, and then a campaign may run alongside that. But that campaign needs to feed into the bigger picture, which is brand. And so there's always something going on in the background. You're always pushing forward with your brand and your brand communications, but you might have specific sales goals that you're trying to achieve. I think that if you look at the role of a CMO, for example, a CMO is going to be thinking brand. They're going to be thinking bigger picture. They're going to be thinking always on marketing. But when you start talking to the CFO and you start talking to the CEO or the exec level, they have specific business requirements. They have specific goals that they have from a monetary standpoint. And if they're a public company, that might be quarter on quarter that they're looking. They may be looking 1 quarter out, 2 quarters out, 3 quarters out, or for the year. And I think that their thinking is driven by that more than anything else. And if they're looking at Q3, they're sitting in Q1 and they have a traditionally slow Q3, they might be thinking, what can we do in Q3 that's going to make a difference to our numbers? And start thinking about that now. And then when you've got that mindset, it's like, okay, what campaign can we be thinking about for Q3 that's going to help us meet our number? So it's 2 very fundamental different paths. People who are owning the brand in the longer term and want to take you to a destination, to an end game in the longer term, and those that have things that are more short term and have the requirements to hit those goals.
I think that part of the problem is that when I agree that there are definitely places where you have the campaigns make sense. You're doing something specifically. It's running up to an event, a point in time, or it's something like that. But when you look at a lot of things that we're doing now as marketers, and when you transfer to like something like where you're looking at how much traffic are you generating on a website, how much of that traffic is converting to a late stage sales asset, how many of those are translating to a conversation with a marketer, with a salesperson, an SQL, a sales qualified lead, and how many of those are converting, and be able to track all the information is get the game. And I understand that not everybody can pull those pieces, but that should be the goal. And I think that people's hesitation is that means that your quarter-to-quarter result bullet items is how well you've done and how well you improved over the past quarter and moving those numbers. Did you get more conversions? Did you get more closed sales? Did you get a larger deal size? I don't know. Do you agree? Do you disagree?
Well, I agree with what you're saying. I mean, ultimately, it's are you willing to go with a long play, or are you wanting to go with a short-term play? And are you wanting to get results from something in the immediate effect? If you're talking about driving conversations and then allowing those conversations to turn into long-term business, then I think people tend to look at, okay, let's get business through the door. Let's get business. How can we get business through the door? And all the things that you're talking about, I mean, honestly, you could do something that gets you 1 million engagements and turns into 0 sales. That doesn't really matter at the end of the day, right? I mean, it's unless you're thinking, okay, I'm supporting my brand, and you've got a brand initiative that's going in. But really, you know, marketing comes down to, and I tell my staff here at Impress Labs, marketing comes down to our ability to create conversations, whether that's in the near term or the long term.
Well, the right conversation, yeah.
Absolutely, the right conversations, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to drive sales, right? There's not necessarily going to be that conversion from one to the other. And I know we're jumping off into another topic right now, but you know, we're about creating conversations. We're about creating conversations in the short term, and we're about creating conversations in the long term. At Impress Labs, we're blessed that the mix of clients that we have is predominantly long-term based. We have retainers in place on an annual basis, and on an annual basis, we're able to re-up them. And it's because we're looking longer term at what the client should be doing, where they should be going, and we're advising them on their path. But at the same time, we've got this immediate stuff in front of us that we need to perform. And we need to get their name out. We need to start these conversations. We need to create some brand recognition for our clients in the hope that some of these conversations are being created. And so we do that with a long-term view, but we also do it on campaigns. We're like, okay, so we've got this new product coming out. How does this fit in with the bigger picture? How does it fit in with the brand? Where are we going with the brand? We've talked about this creating agents process that we put in place to actually get away from that campaign without thinking about brand and longer term marketing. And, you know, we'd have a lot of CEOs, CMOs, VPs of marketing. Oh, we've got this campaign that we're working on for this product launch. And the first question I would ask, how does that fit into your brand? What do you mean? How does it fit in with our brand? I've got some immediate goals that I've got to hit in terms of sales and getting this thing on the shelf or whatever it might be, and then pushing product out into the marketplace. But I actually stop them and say, okay, think about this. We can achieve your short-term goals with a campaign, but how does that campaign fit into the long-term marketing goals you have for your organization? And honestly, it doesn't. 99% of them are like, well, we just need to focus in on this. And what I think that does is I think it limits the value that you're able to pull out of the marketing initiatives that you're actually putting in. If you're thinking about brand and bigger picture, the dollars that you're spending from a campaign perspective are elevated.
You mentioned, just for anybody who hasn't heard some of our other conversations, could you briefly tell what you mean by creating agents?
So we were approached or get approached a lot of times. We had some frustration with the approach, which was, can you work on this project? And we're a retainer-based business. We want a longer-term approach, exactly what you're talking about. We want a longer-term approach. So we devised a process that would allow us to take that requirement and turn it into a bigger picture. And that is, so they would go to what I call the expression phase right away. We want to do this press event. We want to do this event. We want to do this experience, whatever it may be, or we want to do this website. So they've already kind of figured it out. So we decided, okay, for me, that is step 5. That's the easiest step. I mean, obviously, it takes a lot of work to bring these events together, to put this expression together, but it's the easiest step. The first step is, what's the end game? What are you really trying to do here? The second step, and then getting it down in black and white. So basically, everybody understands what they're there to do, what the end game, what are we trying to achieve? And instead of talking about, okay, well, we got this many hits and we got this much exposure, at the end of the event, did we achieve what we set out to do? The second step is actually identifying those people that can help us achieve the end game. So it's whether those are the purchasing people, whether those people influence purchase, whether those are people that influence people throughout the chain. Get them down in black and white so we know who we're dealing with.
And those are the agents you're saying?
Those are the agents, effectively. And then the third part, and the agents are actually part of your company as well. And this is something else that a lot of companies miss out. They miss out on educating people that they're paying to do a job in the form of brand. And being able to educate the people that work at a company, that's your first marketing tool right there. Get them educated. But the third step is actually, what is that brand? What does that brand need to be to those agents in order to affect the end game? And if you can get steps 1, 2, 3 written down, very concise, in black and white, then you can start to sit down and really engage this thing, turn it on and say, okay, so how are we going to get that brand into this set of people in order to affect the end game? And that's the strategy step. And that, steps 1 through 4 are often skipped over, and they go straight to the expression step, the communication step, which is step 5. But steps 1 through 4 are really where the value is derived, and actually the return on your investment can be augmented significantly if you spend some time up front thinking about it. And that goes back to your original point, Steve. Are we a campaigns-based business, or are we a long-term marketing picture? And I think we are, with the companies that we're working with, we're starting to see this creating agents, and whether it's steps 1 through 4 or 1 through 5, whatever it might be, people are starting to now think about it more in a strategic terms, and starting to think about marketing as a business tool rather than how some CEOs see it as necessary evil.
Yeah, and I think a good example when you look at. It's actually an older example, but I think an example of kind of going from one and done type activities to longer term ongoing all this marketing thing is actually an example from Chuck Byers, who was, at the time we were working with Chuck Byers, who is he's now a professor over at Santa Clara University, but in his day when Chuck was a terror, was running branding and communications for TSMC, one of the largest wafer manufacturers in the world. And I remember one of the times he came in, and at the time TMC was doing, I don't know, a press release or 2 a day at a minimum. And they were about everything as you can imagine from a large company. Everything was across the board. And he came in and said, this stops. No more press releases from all these things. Going through exactly the process you talked about. He said, here's what TSMC is about. Here's what our brand is about. And if a communication doesn't hit one of these points or support one of these points, we're not going to make that announcement. And they went down to doing a couple releases a week. They're still a huge company. They were a traded company. But that whole thinking about how did each of these communication work in the long term, as we go forward, how does this affect our brand? And I think that's a great example of thinking longer term as opposed to let's just communicate all this stuff and have this confusing message. Even to the point of like this series, and what we want to talk about is the difficulty of this is not just let's do 2 shows about the difficulty of marketing to technology. Let's do a series of talking to the smartest people who market to technology, because that's what we do.
Yeah, actually, Steve, you just triggered a thought in my head. I go through a lot of branding exercises with a lot of companies, and I've seen it happen in the past. And these companies go through this branding exercise. They spend a lot of money on it, and what they do with it is probably, here's the document, throw it in the drawer, just get their head down and start working again.
Right.
And so, one of the biggest things that we are pushing as a marketing agency is the branding work is just the beginning. What you get down in black and white is just the beginning. It's how you live that brand. It's how you express that brand. It's how you do it on a day-to-day basis. And I like to simplify things as much as possible, as you know. And by simplification, I mean, okay, let's get one thing, 1 or 2 sentences that really are the core of the value of this business in the marketplace. And let's try and put that into some kind of vision, value, proposition, just a mashup of that, but keep it short and concise so that everybody understands what they're doing for this company, how they live out the brand on a day-to-day basis. And I think the problem is, Steve, is that a lot of companies don't have that. They don't have that, so they're not going out 1, 2, 3 years. They're not striving for something. They may have something called a vision, but if you ask in the enterprise, like, what's the vision of this company, you might get 10,000 different answers. They might be loosely based around the same concept, but it'll be 10,000 different answers. If you've got something short, sharp, and punchy that everybody can repeat, everybody understands what their role is in achieving from a business standpoint, then that is something that you can hang all your marketing around and drive towards. Just doesn't exist in a lot of companies. That's
I think we must be psychic, because the question I was about to ask you is kind of a wrap-up question. What advice could you give to a marketer about how to start thinking about more, always marketing? And I think that would probably be your answer.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, just get that anchor. There needs to be an anchor for your marketing initiatives. And everything feeds up to brand, but that brand anchor. You should be able to justify everything you do. From a campaign standpoint, you can justify it and say, oh, I want to go out and raise X $1,000 from sales in Asia, or whatever it might be. But it needs to also fit in with the anchor in the company, and then you can get full value out of the marketing dollars that you're spending.
Dave, if somebody wants to continue the conversation with you, where can they find you in the social sphere?
Dave R in SF is on Twitter, and then you can find me on the usual channels, LinkedIn. And Steve, I have to apologize. I've got a frog in my throat, and it won't leave its pad this morning. So sorry if the audio's been pretty bad.
No, I appreciate you coming out, and especially since you're feeling a little poorly. And thank you very much for joining me this morning.
Thanks very much, Steve. Cheers.